Man, Liam Cohen is hiring everybody. The Jaguars offensive staff is just about done. I'll tell you all about it here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen, reminding you that you can find us wherever you get podcasts, whether you watch them or listen to them. Make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode. An episode that is basically a crossover Thursday episode around our network. There's only one crossover left, though, and that's the one for the big game. We will basically not talk about that. We're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars today, but Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Shout out to the Everydayers for joining us here on the show. And here's what we're going to talk about. Are you concerned that the Jaguars offensive coaching staff, or the defensive coaching staff for that matter, that they're too young? It's a real good question. And the GM, whoever that is going to be when they name him, is probably going to be someone else who's really, really young. Are you scared? I'll ease your mind a little bit with that. Fans now value non-play calling OCs because everybody's in love with Grant Udinsky today, who is the new OC. He won't be calling plays here, but everyone now all of a sudden realizes just how important that job is all of a sudden. When I kept telling people last year, it's more than just play calling. It's more to it than that. It's about teaching. And, you know, when they go out there and call those plays, they're only calling what they've taught. You need to be concerned with what they're teaching as opposed to what they're doing on Sunday. But who is Grant Udinsky? We will start right there at the very top. Grant Udinsky is a dude that's been coaching football for about 6 or 7 years. Good story. Was sleeping in his car in front of a Walmart like in 2018 or something like that. I love good stories, man. And I'm not one of those people that is going to sit here and beat up on these guys for hiring Grant and worry about the fact that, okay, where'd all these dudes come from, right? Here's what's happened. They've hired Grant Udinsky, who was the assistant offensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings last year. And from what I heard, a big part of what they did and what they were able to get accomplished. And KOC, Kevin O'Connell, really swears by him and talks about how good of a coach he is. So it's also someone that it sort of comes from the indirect tree that Liam Cohen comes from with the Rams, which is where KOC came from. And he actually worked with Kevin O'Connell. So I'm sure he has a pretty good source to tap into when realizing whether or not Grant Udinsky is going to be a good fit here in Jacksonville. And I told you, it's all about alignment. So they've also hired pass game coordinator Shane Waldron to go along with quarterback coach Spencer Whipple. And I know a whole bunch of people sitting here going, a whole bunch of people like, well, Shane Waldron failed. Look, when a guy gets a shot because he did well, and then he gets a shot to do something and he doesn't do well, they don't just take those people and send them off to some work camp somewhere. No, you just go back to doing what you used to do. Like one of the examples I give you is Norv Turner. Norv Turner was one of the greatest offensive coordinators to ever call plays in the National Football League. He just wasn't a good head coach. So he went right back to being an offensive coordinator. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think it's recency bias or right nowism that really makes people get really weird, and they go, no, well, he failed at that, so he ain't no good. Like Press Taylor might be really good at his job, the job that he's taken out with the Bears as a quarterbacks coach. You just never know. I mean, you really don't. But these guys got there for some, they got to this point for some reason, and just because they failed doesn't mean that they just have to go and start doing construction somewhere. No, it's not how this works. I mean, a lot of people fail at getting to the pinnacle of your profession, and you just have to go back and just do what got you to that point and live a really good charmed life. Steve Spagnuolo tried to be a head coach, had a horrible record, and he's one of the best defensive coordinators ever. I think if some fans have their way, Steve Spagnuolo, once he failed as a head coach, he'd have been put out to pasture somewhere. That's just not how this works. But who is Grant Udinsky? Coached at Baylor 4 years, a GA, and then after that was in the National Football League. And as we have spoken about, he's been with the Minnesota Vikings in a bunch of various roles, but mainly he was the right-hand man to KOC, and I heard he did a lot of the work with Sam Darnold. So he's an up-and-coming coach, a whippersnapper, if you will, just like all of these guys are. It seems like they're hiring, and I know we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But what you're seeing is, I did a show the other day, and I said these guys they're teachers. They're young, energetic teachers. And this is exactly what I even heard somebody say, this is what they want. I think Jarian Jones said something like that. You know, maybe we need guys that can relate to the players a little bit better or whatever. I think that's a little bit overblown, but I do believe that somebody heard that message. Somebody definitely heard that message. And now this team has a different energy about it, a different energy and a different synergy about it, where they're not doing things the old way. They're not doing things the old way. They're doing things very, very new. Now, this also kind of feels a little bit like 2013 when they hired Gus Bradley. And I know people don't want to hear that, but it does. And just because you did this before doesn't mean you can't do it again. Just because you did something once and it didn't work. But Gus Bradley was a first-time head coach. There was a first-time GM, and Dave Caldwell, who at the time was like 36, 37 years old. It was a first-time owner in Shad. Then you had Ty Wash, you know, guys like that, defensive line coach / defensive coordinator. There were a lot, and Bob Babbage was here. Remember Bob Babbage? Well, Babbage is still coaching and doing a really, really good job. So I just, I'm of the belief that, look, just because it didn't work before doesn't mean it's not going to work now. And I think these days this is a little bit different, and they're doing it a little bit more carefully. They have a very, very young staff. What's weird is all of these dudes are young enough to be my kid. That's the thing. I got sons their age, and I have to come to grips with the fact that this is just going to be different, man. Different, with a whole bunch of different ideas. There is no veteran presence. There was talk that Ron Rivera would be possibly somebody that they talk to and they look at to be a senior member on this staff. Well, he took the GM job at Cal in college, so that's not going to happen. I do think there's going to be a little bit of a concern from a lot of people, because that's what Jaguar fans do. They panic. But first, talk a little bit more about Grant Udinsky, the offensive coordinator, and what I think he's going to bring, and really get into the fact that, now everybody wants to understand how important the role of a non-play calling offensive coordinator is. This is something I've been beating over people's head for 2 or 3 years, that it's just not about play calling. And then now you notice what is happening here too, when folks were saying, well, they need, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get to that. But remember this, when folks were saying this is why we can't get a defensive coordinator as a coach, because if you take a defensive guy, then you're gonna lose your offensive guy each and every year. Well, that can't happen with a head coach. But Liam is doing something that a defensive coach could have done. And this is, I kept using the Rams as an example of the team and the 49ers. He's doing it. This is what a defensive coach would have done. So I'm going to talk about that, all of that stuff, here in segment 2 on Locked on Jaguars. All right. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. I'm going to tell you, man, the only time I missed, I had a ticket. I hedged my bets and said both teams, Denver or Seattle, was going to score a touchdown or a field goal, and then it was a safety. Tore my ticket to pieces. But other than that, I've always done good. And you can do it too. And you can place a $5 bet and potentially win 200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's the icing on the cake. Download the app and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just bet $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sports partner of Super Bowl 59. Segment 2 here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day talking about the Jaguars hiring Grant Udinsky to be the offensive coordinator. I think it's very, very important that we understand that it's okay to have an offensive coordinator that's not a play caller because your coach is a play caller. That is Liam's strength. Liam Cohen said, yes, I will be calling plays here in Jacksonville. And there's no confusion about that. But fans were really, really invested in who the offensive coordinator was going to be, because I think we've all learned that a coordinator is very, very important, even if he's not calling plays. And this is something that we were trying to, convey that feeling, but in a different way and from a different perspective. And the perspective is that it's not the plays that Doug and Press were naturally calling. It was what they were teaching during the week. I mean, they're not going to call stuff that they don't teach. So while we were mad at the play calls, what we should have been mad at is what were they doing all week? Remember, those teams said they practice well, and then they get on and Doug kept saying that it's not translating from the practice field to the game. Well, it actually was, because whatever you were practicing and however you were practicing, whatever was going on game day, they didn't forget it. It just wasn't going to work because of the way you were teaching it. We learned exactly what you were doing all week in practice because it was on full display on Sunday. I told you, whatever you see consistently on Sunday, that's what they've been doing all week. It may not be what they thought they were doing. It may not have gone the way that they wanted, but make no mistake about it. Teams practice ad nauseum over and over. They talk about it. They go over film. And even with that, maybe the consequences for the way they were playing wasn't good enough. Maybe the communication wasn't good enough. Maybe the guys just didn't believe in it. And maybe what they were being taught to believe in just wasn't any good. Well, I think this is going to change because all of these guys are energetic teachers. They're all energetic teachers. And I think it's going to be very, very important. They've actually made more hires. If I can pull this up real quick, they've actually made even more hires, according to Ian Rappaport. They're hiring John Van Dam as a pass game specialist, sources said, and they're hiring Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron, of course, was in Chicago and got fired as the offensive coordinator, but he used to be with the Rams too, so Liam knows him. He's going to be the quarterback's coach. John Van Dam is every time I say John Van Dam, I keep sitting here thinking about a dude beating me, throwing karate or whatever, taekwondo. But he was the tight ends coach for the Bucks, and finally they get somebody out of Tampa. But this is because the contract had expired. He wasn't even on contract anymore with Tampa, but he was the tight ends coach for the Bucks. He had previously held that title with the Bucks, and now he'll be the first hire of Liam Cohen coming from his old staff in Tampa, or the old staff in Tampa, and he'll be a pass game specialist. So what they're doing is this. There's probably some sentiment and thought that Shane Waldron, or not Shane Waldron, but Coach Udinsky will get a head coaching opportunity at some point, especially if the Jaguars have some success, right? So what they're doing, in my opinion, they're stacking guys behind Liam that can then move to the coordinator role and slide right in and just start teaching, right? And if they lose another one, they got another guy stacked, and they're just going to keep. This is what I said a defensive coach could do. If you're going to continue to lose people every single year, well, you just get that guy and stack a whole bunch of people behind him. So even if he leaves and takes one or two guys with him, you'll probably still have somebody else who's right there who can move up, and maybe not all the way up to the top. And then you can go out and get another coordinator that is also familiar with what they're trying to do. I like the alignment in thought and idea and the theory of just having a bunch of guys who have worked together, who understand each other's workflow, I always the phrase I always like to use, and that's a little bit of a different area, but it was in the military. I used it, and then I learned this also in my private business. You always want people you can turn your back and walk away from, and you know they're gonna be consistently teaching the exact same things that you are, and there's not this whole big difference in background, and normally that's not really a problem because a coach knows what expectations are. A coach knows what he needs to do, even if it's a system he hasn't worked and taught, and they can flip that thing and do it a little bit differently. And football is football because a lot of it's technique. A lot of it is, okay, complimentary. How do you want to do this? Tell me how you want to do this, and I can do that too. Because a lot of these dudes do have flexible backgrounds. But there's nothing wrong with this familiarity as long as the guys can coach, and as long as you can come in here and implement your system the way that you want it done. And it's nice to just have guys you can turn your back to, and let them coach offensively and defensively. But I will tell you this, the energy level that I sense that's going to come from a lot of these coaches, I think it's something that's needed. And I think it's going to really resonate with a lot of those young players. Communication, especially after last year, because I found out at the end of the season something that I did not know. And that is that guys were having communication issues with Ryan Nielsen. And the guys that seemingly were having those communication issues are dudes that you don't think are people who would have a communication issue. So that says a lot. And it tells me, based on the things that I heard about Ryan Nielsen from whether it's Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons or Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints, like the players loved him and they swore by him. I'm going to tell you what I believe happened with that. What I believe happened with that was somebody got in his ear. You know how you meet somebody and somebody's already told you something? I know this for a fact. People have told me over the years, they say, man, you ain't nothing like what I heard you were. And I said, yeah, well, I can tell you what you heard. And I can probably tell you who you heard it from. So, yeah, I get it. But they'll treat you the way they've heard other people feel about you. And they'll treat you the way they think. Because if somebody misdiagnoses you and say, hey, man, we need to get tough on these dudes and they're not healthy. So what a new coach will do is, okay, that's the problem. All right. So he'll come in thinking that's the problem and he'll treat you that way. And that's not fair. This is another reason I wanted a clean sweep and a fresh start, fresh eyes for everybody. I want everything to be earned. I want everybody to start like ground zero as it pertains to, whatever happened in the past. That's we ain't gonna worry about that. We're just gonna press forward and move forward. And I know that's not necessarily realistic all the way across the board, but it now hopefully with the way this process is, fans will have more of a value for position coaches and coordinators, even those that don't call plays. It's extremely, extremely important. I have no idea if it's gonna work or not. I just like the thought that they're trying and they're not sitting there and they're not afraid. Are they too young? Do they need more experience? Do they need an old head over there? Well, if that's how you feel, yeah, I got a solution. I don't necessarily think they do, but perhaps if that's the case, there are some people that's still out there that can help them, and I'll name some names. We'll get into that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by BetterHelp. What do you want for 2025? What do you want that story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's a part of you or your life you want to rewrite or a plot twist you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping you craft the life you deserve. It's not the crisis situations. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for growth personally, therapy is a powerful tool that can help guide you to your journey. All right, whether it's learning how to set boundaries or tackling stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Good. Even if you've tried therapy, if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. Make sure you tap into Locked On NFL. Your boy Tony Wiggins is over there too at about 2 o'clock every day. Come on over in the barbershop and hang out with me and just talk about all the things around the NFL with the use of local experts that we do every single day. And also Tyler Rowland hit you with a double shot of espresso early in the morning. There are 2 shows on Locked On NFL. You can get them both daily wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you check it out wherever you watch or listen. Now, are the Jags too young? I wouldn't necessarily say that. If they decide they need an older coach, or the way they talked to Ron Rivera for a reason, and they did it after they had already hired the defensive coordinator. So perhaps it was just to feel out ideas. Perhaps Ron Rivera wasn't really comfortable with, what his role was going to be, and he wanted to do something else. I don't know why it didn't work out, but it didn't. But if they decided they still want to go that route, there are other coaches out there. One that keeps coming to mind for me is Leslie Frazier. Leslie Frazier is a really good call. I mentioned Norv Turner. He would be a good candidate. He came out of retirement to help his son Scott last year out in Las Vegas. Those are the types of people. They almost call them like analysts in college, right? They pay these dudes that used to be coaches. I remember Sarkisian was an analyst for Nick Saban when he got fired from his previous stop. And I think Lane may have done that same thing, or Lane may not have, but they've done that in college. And now with the landscape of the NFL looking a lot like college, there's not a big difference in the way those two entities are operating. Guys getting paid now and all of that stuff. I do believe that perhaps there are some coaches, some guys who have coached for a long, long time. It's almost like Tampa. I know y'all want to mention Tampa, but Tampa they still have Bruce Arians built right into that program. And that's pretty much the type of guy that I'm talking about. If that's something that they feel like they want to do, they could hire Mike Mularkey. It doesn't have to be someone who was wildly successful as a head coach, because if they were wildly successful, they probably would still be doing it. But it just has to be someone that understands the landscape of the NFL, understands the certain situations on how things are going, just some fresh eyes on the situation. But I'm not pressing for that. And it's like, to me, it's all about the comfort level and whatever they feel comfortable with. Whatever Liam Cohen feels is the best thing to do, that's what I want him to do. Whatever makes him comfortable, whatever thing that he has to do or whatever to get this thing going the way that he wants to go, and that everything goes smoothly. That's what I want. But what I do love is that they're coach centric. This is, when you ask me whose team this is, before I couldn't tell you. I'm being honest with you. Before I couldn't tell you. It wasn't necessarily Trevor's team. It was, in a sense, his team, but it wasn't his team because he hadn't really done anything to earn that yet. It was his team because people gave it to him. Doug didn't exude great leader after a while. At first he did, because I think it was something that they needed, but Doug Peterson didn't really come across as this alpha dog leader. He came across as someone who wanted everything to blend well. And it wasn't enough. It's not enough. Not enough. Now, some people can say it was Trent's team, and Trent acted like it was his team. And that's what he kind of walked around like that. And see, a guy like that doesn't do anything for me on game day. So I've always wanted to have somebody who could just battle cry the troops, and you're looking at it and it's the alpha and omega. That's where it starts and that's where it stops. This is Liam Cohen's team. It's Liam Cohen's team. It's all of his real smart buddies. I think offensively, they are going to be sharp. They are going to be crisp. They're going to be able to matriculate the ball. You will see situational football where it's 3rd and 5 and they're going to get 7. And you can start counting on it, because I went and watched a bunch of their tape. I watched some Rams tape too, but I mainly watched a lot of the rhythm, a lot of like the Vikings were the same way. This past season, the Vikings, except in those big games, and even in those big games, they had things open and their quarterback missed them. Right? Sam Darnold, he just missed them against Green Bay, against Detroit. He just would miss a whole bunch of things when they did. And then in the playoffs, he did it again. They just could not execute because Sam couldn't get right. Trevor Lawrence is a better player than that. He's a better player than that. And I anticipate that what you're going to see from the Jacksonville Jaguars is a bunch of situations where there's no quit. There's always they're going to be able to get in and out of a rhythm. With the Jaguars under Doug Peterson, when things started going wrong, they just like stayed that way for like a quarter and a half, right? And you could almost see them in this little funk, and they're trying to figure it out and you probably ain't going to see them going for it all the time the way Doug did. You're going to probably see them take a lot of 3 points, and they're going to take every time because they know they're going to get the ball back and they're going to be able to do the same thing. I think Doug got to the point where what he was doing was he was going for it because he didn't know if they were going to get back to the red zone or not. And I think that's coaching with fear. I don't think these guys are going to be scared. That's one thing about young people. Young people ain't scared of nothing, because guess what? They ain't been around long enough to fail at anything. And I like that for the Jaguars, and I like the energy. And this staff seems to be, we always talk about culture. We always talk about identity. This staff seems to be, at least from a communication standpoint, resonating with a lot of the fans in this city that are between the age of 20 and 40. And I think that is huge because of the future that the Jaguars will have here with the new stadium that's going to be built, and the fact that it all feels so different. It all feels so different. We got the fresh start we actually want. All right, we'll give you another show tomorrow before the Super Bowl. We will be, and Monday's show will be, Monday show will be a little bit later in the day because I'll be on a flight coming back to Jacksonville. So Monday show will be a little bit late. I'll be back in the afternoon. I think I get back some point about 3 or 4. So you'll have a late show on Monday, but you got one coming tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars. Hopefully we'll see who they hire. If they keep hiring people, we're going to check it out, man. And we'll definitely bring it to you here on Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you guys tap in here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. All right, we'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.